Hello, BookTube. It's Tag Tuesday, and I have a tag for you that is very similar to a tag that I just did recently, but also different in subtle ways that I really like. This is not the mid-year freakout tag. This is the mid-year check-in tag that I just recently saw on Harriet Rosie's channel, and I'm afraid I'm not really clear on who invented it. But if I can figure that out before I post this video, I will credit the original. But it's the mid-year check-in tag is a little different from the mid-year freakout tag because it's a little. It seems to me that a lot of the questions are a little more subjective, a little less assessing, a little less of the spreadsheet and a little more of your personal reactions. I love these kinds of questions. Absolutely love them. I want everybody on BookTube to answer these kinds of questions. I have been watching the videos and I find them fascinating, and of course it's on my mind. Anyway, these kinds of questions are on my mind anyway because it's June, which means it's time for me to start going over my list of books that I've read so far this year and assess where I stand. I have separate sheets of paper for every category that will be part of my year-end Steve Reads Best and Worst Books of the Year roundup. And for those categories, I just list every even vague contender. In January and February and March and April, I don't bother to do any kind of qualitative assessment unless a book stands out right away. Instead, I just keep a running tally of the books in that category. And those lists are, as you would imagine, kind of long by now. So now is the time for me to start paring down those lists and thinking about the first half of the year. And tags like this really help me to do that. So we'll just get started. The first question is a groaner, not for me, but maybe for the rest of you. And I the first few times in the first couple of years that I was on BookTube that I answered questions like this correctly and truthfully, I did get comments in the comments field saying, you're flat out lying. I'm hoping that those of you who have stuck around all this time and watched all these videos and listened to me opine about all these books will maybe give me the benefit of the doubt, but I will stress again that I don't do anything else but read and play with Frida. That's pretty much it. Reading and writing about books are my entire life. I don't have a family. I don't have in-person friends, except once in a blue moon, because I film it for you. I don't have a real job. I don't have any kind of presentable hygiene. I'm not even wearing pants. It's all I do. And I also don't sleep as much as you do, where you start going comatose at 9:30 at night, and by 11:30 you are basically dead until 7:30 the next morning. And not only is that not long enough for you, but you need a mechanical device blaring in your ear to get you up even then. Or I think a normal human would probably just sleep forever. That is not me. So all of this is throat curling preface to the first question, which is how many books have you read so far this year? And as of this morning, excluding rereads, so far in 2019 I have read 511 books. I intend to keep that rate up. I would like to increase that rate even. I have a goal. I have a numerical goal for the number of books I would like to read in 2019. I would like to at least equal the number that I had for 2018, if not exceed it. I am fairly confident that I can reach that. Question number 2, what is your favorite book so far this year? Not the best book, not a list of the best books, not your many favorites, just your single favorite book. And again, I cannot narrow it down to one. I have 2 books that stick in my mind the most. They are the ones I think were the most brilliant. They are, oddly enough, paradoxically enough, although they were my favorite books, they are incredibly depressing. Both of them are incredibly depressing. Just ice, water in the face, wake-up calls, both of them. But I thought brilliantly done. Controlled anger and wonderful prose. I listed them both here. The first one is by David Wallace Wells, and it's The Uninhabitable Earth, which is it's a very plain cover. You almost miss it in a bookstore, and it's the author taking what are not in any way outlandish scientific projections of catastrophic climate change, taking the range of those predictions, and actually telling you what that would mean for you, what that would mean for the world around you, not some amorphous future Earth where our grandchildren are going to live or die, but what that will actually mean for you. And it is just unforgettable. It's just unforgettable. There isn't a single bit of optimism anywhere in it, but it's unforgettable. And the same thing is true with another book, a book that I already mentioned in the mid-year freakout tag, which is The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, which is it's not about the end of the world. It's about the world we currently live in. It's about the digital world and what we're all doing in it, whether we realize it or not. When I upload a video to YouTube, what am I doing? When I do that, when we all do that, when you watch one, you are a product, you are a participant in surveillance capitalism, whether you want to be or not. And the book is long, and it's very detailed, and I cannot recommend it strongly enough to anyone who currently lives in the real world. And it's not just, those of you who have, I admit, a touch of the paranoid about me when it comes to modern technology. But this is very much grounded in the real world, in the world that we all live in and deal with every day. What are you doing by making yourself a commodity that your phone can use as a means of barter with other devices and with other companies? Not you doing that, but you being used as a currency. What are you doing when you do that? And to what extent does it go? For instance, if you live in a house made after 2010, if your house was built after 2010, answer me this question right off the top of your head without doing any research. Is your living room's thermostat listening to you? If you're not sure, then you ought to read this book. Even if you are sure. If you, for instance, are driving a new car, whether you know it or not, your car is listening to you. And the ways that these gigantic surveillance capitalist organizations get around what would otherwise be legal strictures are infinite. They're incredibly various, and it's not just what they do that, like for instance, if you have one of those electronic valets, one of those electronic things sitting in your living room, a Siri or something like that, or Alexa. If you have something like that sitting in your living room, and you haul out the instruction manual that it came with, or you look up the instruction manual online, you will see way down deep in the instructions the way to turn it off, the way to make sure that the device is not listening anymore. Because in order to respond to your verbal command of, "Hey Siri, what's playing at the Odeon tonight?" Siri has to be listening. Siri cannot be off, or it will not hear that question. So it has to be listening, and maybe you get the thing because it's a fad and it's a new doohickey and you think you might use it, and then you realize, oh my God, what am I doing? I've put a surveillance device in my home voluntarily, and you want to shut it off. First of all, unplugging it will not necessarily do that, but also the instructions for how to shut it off will not necessarily do that. There's a lot of money riding on here, and Zuboff's book is amazing on all aspects of this. So I strongly recommend both of these books, but they're both incredibly depressing. So, be forewarned. Let's see here. Question number 3 is, what's the most disappointing book you've read this year? So far, I have a lot of 2019 books still to read. So far, the answer doesn't really have much competition, and that is The Case for Trump by Victor Davis Hanson. And some of you who have been listening to this channel for a while might think, well, of course you're going to say that because you hate Donald Trump. Some of you who've known me longer than BookTube or YouTube or whatever will say you've hated Donald Trump for a very long time. I have hated Donald Trump for a very long time. I know all about him, and every chance that I've had to write against him, I have taken. It is an appalling, ongoing nightmare to me that he is President of the United States. And that is not Trump derangement syndrome. It's a classic lazy tactic of Trump's alt-right supporters is to say that anyone who dislikes him is literally mentally ill, as if there's no other reason, as if there's never, ordinary people have never been presented with a reason to dislike this guy, not even one. So if you hate him, then you must be deranged. And there's a bit of truth to that. Of course, I was never really going to like a book called The Case for Trump, but I do like Victor Davis Hanson. I think he's a really good historian, a really good writer, even when he's not writing history. He writes journalism pieces as well. And so I had hope that The Case for Trump would either pleasantly surprise me or at least make me think without making me angry, that it wouldn't condescend to me. And instead, this book it's very, very, it's about as close as a classically trained historian and classicist can come to using terms like Trump derangement syndrome. If somebody as smart as Victor Davis Hanson can only say that the reason people hate Trump is because he has a Queen's accent, or because he's boorish and unkempt, so you, Victor, are not that shallow, but you're assuming that everybody else in the country is. You yourself can look beyond such things, but you're assuming that most people can't. And assumptions like that just killed the book for me. I was infuriated by it. Disappointed as well, though, but also infuriated. I was disappointed because, as heretical as it might be to hear from me, of all people, I think there probably is a case to be made for Trump. I think there's probably a case to be made for almost any democratically elected leader. I can't imagine what that case would be. I look at every single metric, and I do not see it. Instead, I see shrieking at me the case against. I look at the metrics of a grifter who is personally enriching himself every single day that he's president, shaping private business, shaping international business to enrich himself. A wannabe dictator who tells his propaganda arm that he would like it if his people sat up and did what he told them when, most of the country didn't vote for him. Would-be autocrat who wants more time in power is obviously going to say, if he loses the 2020 election, he's obviously going to say that it was fake. He's obviously going to refuse to leave office. I mean, he's outright said it, so I don't see why anybody would think that's paranoid to think. But also, the horrible, Italian comedy of his administration, one unbelievably corrupt nincompoop after another, and also children dying in concentration camps, and a million other things that I would think, okay, you lump all those together, there's no possible way to make a case in favor of any of this. Where if something bad happens in our country or in the rest of the world, if a hurricane strikes an island and causes massive amounts of death, if a cop shoots a civilian on the street who was complying with everything the cop was saying just because he felt like it and turned off his body camera before he did it, if I don't even know, if a car goes off the Golden Gate Bridge and everyone inside is killed. No matter what it is, when something bad happens, you can now set your watch that within 24 hours, the President of the United States will take the side of the thing that did the bad thing. Well, you should have built underground if you were worried about hurricanes, or, you had a shoddy infrastructure. I don't know what you were expecting. Or, you were complying with the cops' wishes, but, you looked suspicious to me. I would probably have advocated for your death penalty and then kept advocating for your death penalty after genetic evidence cleared you. Just no matter what it is, and that wears you down. That has a cumulative effect. That no matter what horrible thing happens in the country or the rest of the world, the President of the United States is going to side with the horrible thing. Even given all that, I like to hold out hope that there is a possibility that someone could have made the case for Trump. And I would have hoped that somebody like Victor Davis Hanson would be that person. And instead, no. The book was just incredibly disappointing. The largest disappointment so far. We shall see if it succeeded. I don't think it will be. Question number 4. What genre have you read the most this year? That's easy. Fiction. You may not think that when you watch this channel and listen to me talk about books, but I read everything. I read everything that comes across my plate. and I get more fiction than I do anything else. This year is just another in an unbroken string of years in which, as I sometimes point out to my other book reviewing friends and other bookish friends, this is yet another year in which I've read more so-called literary fiction than they have, when they do nothing else. And I would be willing to bet that's true. I just read more. So it stands to reason that it would be true. But I read everything that I get, everything that's sent to me, everything that's of interest, everything that is new, that I can. And that invariably means more fiction than anything else. So it's been fiction. And I have to say, I have to add this, I have to shoehorn this in, hasn't been a particularly good fiction year so far. This point last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, I was much more impressed with the crop of fiction than I am this year. I don't know if that's going to change. We still have a lot of time. Question number 5 is name a favorite new author you discovered this year. And for me, I don't know if it was her debut or not, but it's Naoko Abe, who did Cherry Ingram. She did a fantastic biography of a guy who was obsessed with saving all of the different kinds of Japanese cherry trees 100 years ago. And I saw that description before the book came out, and I thought, you can't make much of a story like that. And I thought that, I hope I'm saying her name right, Naoko Abe. I thought she did an incredibly good job. What a book that is. Just what a book. I loved it, and I think pretty much anybody would too. It's one of those biographies that's just so well done that it no longer feels like a biography. It feels like just an adventure that you're having. Also, definitely, a second purpose of this answer would be to recommend the book. Let's see here. Question number 6 is, what's the most surprising book that you've read this year? And I think even my mention of it is going to be surprising. It's Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James. I don't know exactly what I was expecting going into this book. It's a sprawling, hyper-sensual, hyper-sexual fantasy novel that comes from... It's a fantasy novel that has been conjugated out of a completely different folklore and mythology basement than the Western view of such things. It's the more I think about it, I go back and reread parts of it, the more I experience that book, the more I cogitate on it, the more of a surprise it is. I think it received decidedly mixed, decidedly tepid responses from critics, and I think I know why that is. I got originally a tepid response from me as well, and I think the reason for that is because all critics, especially science fiction and fantasy fans, but all critics of you who are American or not, who are black or white, all of us are accustomed to the fantasies that grow out of the Western basement of myth and folklore, and this one most decidedly does not. And I think that also, and Marlon James, the author, employs some very strange narrative choices that he makes, and a lot of that, I think it caught a lot of critics by surprise. They weren't quite sure what to make of it. I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I'm still not. But the question is the most surprising, and I was surprised on every page of that book. If by surprise we mean I was expecting one thing and got another, then definitely. And I'm looking forward to rereading it. I don't know if the paperback of that book is going to show up before 2019 is over, but if it doesn't, if it's getting later on in the year and I haven't received the paperback, I'll just read my advance copy again, because I want to grapple with that book for a while. I want to get it, especially if there are more. I don't know. I've lost track of whether or not this is the first book in a series, a projected series. I don't know, but I'm on board if it is. I'm not. I have my criticisms of the book, but I'm not criticizing any of these gambles on the part of the author. Not at all. I love that. I absolutely love that. And also, I have the ultimate cautionary tale in mind, which is Jerusalem by Alan Moore, which this 1,000-page book of his that I read when it first came out and could not make anything out of it at all. My first, second, and third impression of that book is that it was a massive, whopping failure. And it stuck with me, and I have since reread it, and it's not a failure. I don't know quite what it is, but that's my fault, not the book's fault. I have that cautionary tale in my mind now when it comes to Black Leopard, Red Wolf. So I will revisit it again before the year ends. Let's see here. Question number 7. What are your most anticipated 2019 releases? And it's the same. This is the same as the equivalent question in the mid-year check-in or the mid-year freakout tag, because I have an endless list. I'm eagerly anticipating dozens and dozens and dozens of books that are coming out or scheduled to come out before the year is over. I jotted down a few here, and I tried to make sure that I wasn't duplicating. The first one being the Legion of Superheroes, my beloved Legion of Superheroes, the 5 Years Later saga, the first volume of the 5 Years Later saga, which has resisted reprint. There've never been any reprints of it, and it was that a nice hardcover with a dust jacket. It was originally scheduled for later this year. It looks like original release date has been canceled, so I don't know if that hardcover will come out this year or ever. I have no idea. The last time I checked on Amazon was a few days ago, and I got a shocker, a genuine shocker. I looked it up. Hey, I better go. I'll be back.